Welcome. It's just gone 7 p.m., Wednesday, the 4th of September, and you are watching episode 143 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap providing insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, sacrificing regional Australia to appease minority activists, is my guest Phil Donato, MLA, member for the New South Wales electorate of Orange. Phil was raised in Liverpool, New South Wales, and completed a pastry chef apprentice.
True.
Something really different. However, he yearned for something more physically demanding, and a career. And he started his 22-year New South Wales police career. His academy training also introduced him to his future wife. Phil's career progressed from general duties police to a police prosecutor. Seeking respite from the pressure cooker of that is Sydney, in 2005, when he was transferred to the central tableland city of Orange, some 250 kilometres west of Sydney. In 2016, Phil contested the by-election for the state electorate of Orange as an endorsed candidate of the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party. He won the seat by 55 votes. He was re-elected in 2019 and again as an independent in 2023, with more than 53% of the primary vote and more than 72% of the two-candidate preferred vote. Phil remains devoted to representing the people living in the communities of Orange electorate and the broader regional New South Wales. Welcome, Phil.
G'day, Bill. How are you? You've done your research there on that introduction. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's pretty big career changes when you think of it.
Yeah.
A pastry chef, I presume there would be a bit of a few early starts and it'd be a bit of a slaving away in a hot kitchen sort of thing. But then you go to the heat of the streets with crime and all those sort of things in Sydney. So
yeah, true.
That's a pretty drastic change. Was there any moment when you went from I'm not doing the pastry chef anymore, I'm going to be a policeman? Like, was there something in the family that sort of rolled you over to that? Or
no, there wasn't. No. Yeah, look, a good question, Bill. Look, I didn't come from a police family. Had no relatives in the police force. So yeah, look, I left school. Just a little bit of background, I suppose, just to put it into context. I left school in 1990, so showing my age there. Interest rates were pretty high at the time. The economy was pretty slow. It was pretty hard to get work. I went to uni for about 6 months and dropped out. The course I was doing wasn't quite for me. I wanted to start working and earn money. I was working at the time whilst I was studying, I was working in an Italian restaurant in Drummoyne in the western suburb of Sydney. And I was doing that a couple of nights a week. And then I started an apprenticeship at the time. As I said, it was hard to get work. My cousin's husband at the time owned an Italian continental cake shop. So we made lots of cannolis and lovely sweets, Italian sweets. And he was looking for an apprentice, and I was looking for a job. So we so it was sort of like a mutual agreement, and I gave it a try, and I actually didn't mind it. I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, though. It was sort of like a stopgap measure to do something and start getting some work skills and money saved up until I could work out what I wanted to do. During that time, while I was doing my apprenticeship in pastry chefing, I was still working at the restaurant, and I got to meet some guys from one of the local police stations. I think it might have been Balmain or Five Dock or Drummoyne, and we got talking, and one thing led to another, and they said, "Why don't you think about a career in the police force?" And I said, "Oh, okay." I'd never really thought of it, right? But you got paid to go to the academy. I could drive cars fast. I could shoot guns straight. I like keeping fit, doing all those things. And I thought, well, I'll look into it. And I thought I'll, apply. I applied. I got in. Started down at the Goulburn Police Academy in 1995, and Subsequently met my wife, who was also a police recruit at the academy at that time. And we got married a few years later, obviously. But that embarked on a 22-year career in the New South Wales Police Force, where I worked in, southwestern Sydney and Liverpool, Cabramatta, Macquarie Fields, and then doing various things. Cabramatta was the heroin capital of the world, or of Australia at least, back in the late 90s when I was working there. It was just not long after Mr. Newman, who was the local MP for Cabramatta, got murdered. I don't know if you recall that.
Yeah,
he got shot outside his house and was slain, and it was the first political assassination in Australia. And I got seconded with a number of other police to Cabramatta for a few months to try and clean the place up, gangs and drugs and all that sort of stuff. So, but look, one thing led to another, and then I ended up going into one of the great things about the police force is there's so many different areas you can go into specialising in. And after about 7 or 8 years on the street, and my wife and I started a young family, and we thought, let's look for something that's a bit more, a bit more sort of friendly in terms of the hours, and prosecuting fitted the bill. It was Monday to Friday. It was court, 8 till 4:30 sort of shifts, no night shifts. And with a young family going to school, that sort of suited us, and embarked on the police prosecuting career, which sort of took me all around New South Wales and then subsequently we settled in Orange, transferred to Orange, and thus here I am. And then the opportunity came up in 2016 to run for Parliament, and I took the opportunity, and here I am, 8 years later, still in Parliament.
We were talking just before we started the interview off camera.
Yeah.
But that opportunity in 2016 was something that really the coalition made the situation for you in regards to the challenge that they put up to the ticklicious, as they call them, the greyhounds, the greyhound industry.
The dish lickers, greyhounds, yeah.
and the amalgamation of councils. Now, there doesn't seem to be much, anything more important than those things to rile up regional people, because regional New South Wales has had a huge history with the greyhounds and that, because it's poor man's thoroughbred. It's a big industry, and those people, yes, you've got some bad eggs and that, but most of those people love their animals. Yeah. And then you add to that the amalgamation of councils, that goes down like a lead balloon. I mean, we've had that forced on us in Queensland. It angered a lot of people. Newman gave us the opportunity to de-amalgamate, but at our own cost, sort of thing. And some did de-amalgamate, but the other lot didn't, because simply the cost of it, resetting up yourself, was too high. But did you think that was a perfect storm for your situation and the shooters and fishers?
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. It was a perfect storm, and look, I needed a perfect storm to get elected. I think the Nationals had held the seat for 70 years, since World War II, and they held it by 24% margin. And anyway, so look, I needed a lot of things going in my favour in that election. And look, to be perfectly honest with you, I didn't expect to win. I didn't go into the election thinking I was going to be the next member for Orange. I thought, we'll give this a red hot crack. We'll send a strong message to the government that you can't treat the country people of New South Wales like mugs. You can't keep doing these city-centric decisions that have huge impacts on our lives here in the bush and think you can get away with it. We'll make it a marginal seat. We'll take some skin off the gnats. We'll send a strong message to them. And hopefully we can, send a strong message that you can't treat country people as mugs and, make these sort of city-centric decisions. But you're right. You couldn't have scripted it any better, really. The old dish lickers or the greyhounds, like I said, it's a poor man's thoroughbred. But people in the bush, whether they had greyhounds or not, didn't really matter. They understood that, this is a lifestyle, a recreation, a hobby, a business for many people. And, you don't just, because of a few bad eggs, that gets shown on a TV, on Four Corners or on a TV show one night, decide to completely destroy and shut down an entire industry. And the many good people, the many law-abiding people who were doing the right thing, who many of them derived a family business from it, or a decent amount of income from it. That was their income: greyhounds and breeding and training and racing. Who had that taken away from them at the stroke of a pen, pretty much. So there was that, plus obviously the council mergers, the forced council amalgamations, and in the bush, as you would know, Bill, local government is the closest form of government to the people, to the community. But not only that, it is one of the biggest employees in the town, in our communities as well. And when you're talking about amalgamating councils and joining two councils to become one, there's a lot of small towns and communities and villages that could miss out on those services. Potentially jobs as well. These little depots that are scattered around, they will go. Everything would be centralised into the main city, the main town, and people out here really were overwhelmingly quite taken back by that decision to forcibly amalgamate councils. And if you look at the results on polling day, so they were talking about amalgamating Cabon into Orange, and Cabon is like a donut around Orange, if you could sort of visualize it. Orange is a fairly small council. Cabon's quite a large council that circulates, it wraps around it, but it's a big council and a large network of small villages, communities, all those sort of things. And you look at some of the polling booth results from some of those small villages, places like Mullion Creek, Kiddow, Cargo, Yeovil, Cumnock. These are small villages on the outskirts of Cabon. We won some of those booths by 70%, 65, 70%. That was a strong message that, specifically, a lot of it was targeted and focused on the forced amalgamation. So, yeah, look, as a result of me being elected and winning the seat, the government reversed the ban. Mike Baird ended up resigning. Troy Grant was overthrown by John Barilaro. Gladys Berejiklian became premier. They basically put a halt to the forced council mergers. So it had a fairly, it drew a line in the sand. And I think the National Party did wake up after that to some extent, insofar as they realised they couldn't keep on the trajectory they were. That was being the tail behind the dog of the Liberal Party and just going along with whatever the Liberals are doing, because they're going to lead into political destruction. And I think John Barilaro, when he came in as the deputy premier and leader of the Nats, he did try and take him away, and he wasn't scared to then pick a fight with Gladys, over koalas or whatever it might have been, to try and be seen to be standing up for the bush, So I suppose it had a bit of an impact. And but country people, they're fair, reasonably minded people. They want a fair go. They don't want to be treated like mugs, and they don't forget.
They might have woken up in the initial part of it, but they certainly never consolidated on it, because it's just gone from bad to worse for the Nationals in New South Wales over time. I mean, you saw Barwon and Murray fall to the Shooters and Fishers in 2019. I think it was
19.
So you had three Shooters, Fishers, and Farmers. And I think the independents were picking up a bit of headway in the elections as well. So they hadn't really atoned for their past mistakes. And I mean, as I said before, we started this interview, I have seen the new Nationals leader, the member for Dubbo. I've seen him out there with Bowen and other people putting the shovel in the ground for wind farms and solar farms. I don't think that's a good look for Nationals, considering their position in that. So maybe there's more fertile ground for independents or in other national seats coming up in the 27 election.
Yeah, look, I think that's probably right. When I'm just sort of visualising the state map now, I mean, you see more than half of New South Wales, which was Barwon, Murray, and Orange, when we were with the Shooters, Fishers, and Farmers Party, that represented about 55% of the geography of the state. And now, obviously, we're independents, and there are a number of independents. Wagga Wagga, Joe McGurr is the independent member for Wagga Wagga. Dr. Joe McGurr. There's some Labor members up on the far north coast. Janelle Saffron up at Lismore. There's a Greens member, Tamara Smith at Ballina. There's also Dr. Michael Holland down in Bega at Labor. So these were previously coalition or National Party seats. So, yeah, look, the National Party stranglehold. I think I heard one of the ministers say in Parliament in question time a couple of weeks ago that there's the least amount of National Party MPs in the Legislative Assembly in New South Wales at the moment than there's ever been. It's one of the lowest number of National Party MPs in the LA. So that speaks volumes when you think about where they were 10 years ago. But yeah, look, I think you're right. I mean, people want, they're getting away from, I suppose, voting on party lines. They want representation, right? And they don't want to be governed by, in the bush, for example, governed by decisions of the Liberal Party in Sydney. And, to your point, talking about the leader of the Nationals at the state level, Dougal, I do remember seeing that picture with him and Scott Bowen and Twiggy Forrest at a renewable energy zone on the outskirts of the Dubbo electorate near Wellington, I think it was, or somewhere around there, shovels in the ground. I actually saw it in the local paper myself, and I thought, isn't that an interesting trio? And let's not forget, it was the state coalition government who previously, so the Liberal National Government, who previously implemented all these renewable energy zones all around New South Wales, where all these solar farms. Yeah. So it was their government who brought that in, and then now we're having arguments in communities where for example, there's a wind farm going in at Oberon that's been very divisive out there. There's a wind farm going in at Kerrs Creek on the outskirts of Orange, very divisive in the community out there. There's some people who are for it, a lot of people who are against it. Okay, but it's turning communities against each other, and now the National Party are spruiking, and the coalition is spruiking this nuclear policy. It's like, wait on a minute, you guys brought in this legislation to cause us all these renewable energy zones. It's caused all sorts of problems now with communities, at each other's throat over renewable energy, and now you're sort of talking about this nuclear, and it's just sort of sending mixed messages to people and to communities, and very disruptive.
Well, one of the interesting things now, we've since you've come in from your victory in 2019, we've had a change in federal government.
Yeah.
Although we always had the federal government sort of, because most of the time there's been the Senate's been run by a crossbench. There's been, and the way it's going, there's more and more crossbench senators. So we now have a situation where some sort of more extreme members of Parliament, Greens and Lambies and all those sort of people in the Senate, are forcing the governments, it doesn't matter whether it's Labor or Liberal, into a position, right, if you want policy passed, you have to give us something. And usually it's in the area of the environment. Now, we also see this situation in the inner city, and that the Greens are making more ground. In the last federal election in Brisbane, the Greens went from one federal seat to three in the lower house. That is a huge situation. The situation in New South Wales isn't quite as bad yet, but Pleversek is facing down her seat going to fall into the Greens if she doesn't be greener than green.
Yeah.
So now you have a situation where for voting purpose, survival in the inner cities, and also dealing with the crossbench, you now have situations where a government wants to do something, but to get one piece of legislation through, it has to compromise on something else or give something to that crossbench. And usually the sacrifice that goes on the order is regional Australia. It doesn't matter whether it's land closures, difficulties in regards to getting projects over the line, surrendering water from irrigators. It just goes closing down native forest logging, as we've seen in Victoria and Western Australia. No more native forest logging, although it's been a sustainable activity for more than 140 years. Because I come from West Australia. My father grew up in the southwest. His first job was with forestry, and you could take anyone into that as forest, and people would not be able to tell a pristine forest from a forest that was logged 30 years ago, basically. So it's not as though it was the forests were ending. Actually, they were better managed than that. So we've had this shift. We've had this shift where to satisfy this growing number of senators in the federal Senate, we seem to be losing out in the regions. We've just basically lost live sheep trade by 2028. And that was on the basis of, angry ants of animal activists and the Greens and things like that. Getting the deal across for other legislation that the federal Labor government want to get through. But the situation is no better when the Liberals are in charge. If that Senate crossbench is there and it's hostile to regional development.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bill. And I know, obviously, with the Regis decision, and we'll talk about that at some length, no doubt, during this episode. But and the Tanya Plebiscite's decision in relation to that Section 10 declaration over that mine near Blaney, just on the outskirts of between Bathurst and Orange. So, yeah, look, I think the federal Senate and the composition of the Senate is no doubt a challenge to governments of the day to try and navigate and work through and to get legislation through. I, as a state member of Parliament in the lower house, don't have a lot of involvement, obviously, with the federal Senate, but I am, broadly aware of the different parties, the Greens. You've got the likes of Jackie Lambie, you've got Pauline Hanson, you've got Pocock, the former Wallaby rugby union player, and you've got other independents as well. So it's a real interesting dynamic at the moment, and it would be challenging for the governments of the day to work, navigate, and get legislation through when you don't have a majority. And I don't know when the last time a government's had a majority in the Senate, in the federal Senate.
It was actually 1971 to 74
Wow.
with Howard, and the previous time was before that was 62. So they're a fairly rare thing, but usually they aren't that far apart in the earlier days. The people who held the crossbench weren't super extreme. They were they were either somewhere between Liberal or Labor. But now they're they're further south than Labor, so that makes it very difficult. It's a luxury that most governments don't have, and only had for two governments, the Howard and Fraser governments, back in the 70s and in 2004, 2007. So they're pretty rare animals, and they're going to be basically non-existent now, because we've got the situation. I think last election we were up to 18 members of crossbench in the 76-seat Senate. So it's pretty difficult for either Labor or Liberals to get a majority in that house. So it's something we're going to have to face. I
think when you look at the numbers, as opposed to, say, conservative, if you break it down to conservative, moderate, or left or right sort of persuasive of those independents, you probably find the majority are probably more left. I don't know. That's my gut feeling. I know there's been some discussion around potentially, excuse me, potentially a disallowance motion on plebiscite's decision under Section 10, which would need to be passed by the Senate. I'm not sure how those numbers are. Obviously, I don't think you're going to get any Labor MPs willing to cross the floor. I think we'd be dreaming
You
if
won't get any Greens.
and you won't get the Greens. And depending on what some of the other crossbench independent
And the Teals.
senators,
No,
yeah. But like this goes to the heart. Yeah. Well, this goes to the heart of what we're talking about, and so obviously one of the reasons why your broadcast and podcast or these weekly meetings that you have to discuss these regional issues is so important, because it gives a voice to regional Australia, where unfortunately in the parliaments, because of the way it's proportional representation on basis of population. So most of the population is in the cities. So you have far more members of parliament in those areas as opposed to in regional areas, where you've got less MPs covering huge distances to get that sort of proportional population equivalent to the city, and that's a part of a problem as well, right? Maybe that needs to be reconsidered to get more representation for the bush. Is it fair that places like, just in the state, Barwon, where, that's 44% of New South Wales, Parks, the federal seat of Parks, and there's other huge federal seats in Australia where the MPs basically need an aeroplane to get around to see their constituents. Is that a reasonable level of service delivery for constituents, where they might get access to their MP maybe once a year, if that? Probably not, as opposed to in the city, where they can go down the road to an MP's office to raise a concern or a complaint, or if they want to speak to the MP. So that's a whole different argument. But that is one of the reasons, I think, why, obviously, in terms of representation and members of parliament being a voice for regional areas, that's one of the reasons. And then we're seeing these, overwhelmingly left-leaning city-centric decisions being made. It doesn't matter if it's in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, or Canberra, for that matter. And, we can just touch on the Regis decision. That's caused a huge amount of concern here in the Central West. Obviously, we are a mining region. We've got Cadia Mine, which is just on the outskirts of Orange, which is one of the, if not the biggest, one of the biggest employees in our region, in Orange at least, generates thousands of jobs, both direct and indirectly. So many businesses rely on supporting them and their organisation, and it's just been an absolute bonanza, economic bonanza for Orange in the Central West. That Newcrest mine, or Newmont, that's actually taken over, Cadia Valley Mine. It's got a long lifespan. It's got high amounts of ore bodies and gold and copper that's being produced from there. And this mine out at Blaney, potentially a good body of ore, from all indications and people I've spoken to and the research I've done. It would have been $1 billion mine, would have employed hundreds and hundreds of people, would have generated hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars into the local economy throughout the Central West. Good paying jobs for our young people coming through, to encourage people to move here. And it went through a rigorous, thorough planning and approval process, both at a state level and then at a federal level. It was passed by the Independent Planning Commission. It's been years and years, 6 or 7 years to get to where it's been, to where it is. Went through the federal approval process, and then at the 11th hour, from some obscurity comes this Section 10 declaration, which is just taken the community overwhelmingly by surprise. And so many people I've spoken to, businesses, community, people in the street, can't believe what she's done. Especially
I'll just check up Matt where Blaney is, so you can just talk to it. This is Blaney, and it's sort of there's Orange there and Bathurst, so they're probably fairly big towns in regional New South Wales.
Yeah,
Bathurst obviously has got to get some economic spin-off from that
yeah,
mine as well.
yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
the strange thing is the secretiveness of the declaration that vetoed it, and also uh, the bulk. I think on the bulk show, I think he brought up the fact that it's some indigenous sort of whisper type thing in
Yeah,
regards to it's going to affect some part of culture or heritage or whatever. But there's all sorts of accusations that this person is unknown to the locals,
yeah,
and why did she in particular get
yeah,
the ear of the minister when
yeah,
your local Indigenous Land Council,
yeah,
has been involved in the process, given the tick of approval, and this person who's really unrelated to the area by the looks of it, has whispered in the ear, and that's sufficient to put the veto on it.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly right. So the mine, just I can put this into some level of context. Where the mine was freehold property that was farmed for generations. I actually know the fellow who sold it many years ago. I used to live at Millthorpe, which you can just see, which is north of Blaney there. Before I moved into Orange a few years ago, I used to live at Millthorpe, and Kings Plains or McPhillamy Park, where this mine is actually halfway between Millthorpe and Blaney on that map that you've got. And I actually know or knew the farmer who sold his property, several thousand acres, and it had been in his family for generations, to the mine, probably 12, 15 years ago. Um, Certainly,
I hope you got a good price.
yeah,
I
he
hope you
did.
got a good
He,
price.
he did all right. He did all right. And then you're right. The Orange Aboriginal Lands Council, which is the authority under the legislation, the statutory authority that has, some level of influence and say on these matters in this area, in the Orange Blaney area, they had no objection to it. They were pretty much neutral. They said, look, we've got no evidence to suggest that I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but, we don't oppose it. There's nothing in there for us to really warrant us opposing it. So there was never any objection by the local Orange Aboriginal Lands Council to this project. And it went through all the heritage, all the cultural stuff, as you would imagine, during the years and years of planning and approval processes. And then out of left field, some unknown, person who has no standing under the legislation to be, really consulted or have any level of influence over the minister in relation to this, has got into the minister's ear. Like you said, it's been very secretive as to exactly the nature of the discussions that were had between the minister and this person or this group, this small group that's claims to be, some sort of authority on these issues and representatives on this issue. And have somehow persuaded the minister to exercise her powers and discretion to make this Section 10 declaration, which vetoes the project. Now, it's completely undermined the authority of the local Aboriginal Lands Council. So they're clearly the lands councils are not happy about this, because where's it leave them now that some random person or group of people who claim to be some interested party can get to the minister's ear and basically undermine the lands council's decision or influence. And this, no doubt about it, this has just got to do with Plibersek shoring up votes in her own electorate in the Western City of Sydney seat, where she's, where the Greens are a threat to her locally in her electorate. And that's one of the major reasons for her decision. And it's really, really disappointing because it has devastated communities in and around Blaney, people who were waiting on this mine to be approved. It gone through all the signs where it was going to be approved. It went through all the approval processes. Everything had been ticked off. You know, people had started up businesses, hotels, local shops, moved to the area, all those things. Not to mention those towns of Bathurst, Orange, Blaney, Cowra as well. You know, those communities would have really benefited from this mine. They would have had people in those communities and businesses in those communities that would have worked at and supported the mine. You know, and mines are good paying jobs, right? So it's just so devastating to this local community. And you know, the fact that I don't believe, has even been to the site, certainly not with the permission of Regis, who owned the site. They're not aware of the minister ever.
But they've looked at a map, that's enough.
They've just looked at a map on Google Earth, you know, from their office in Sydney or Canberra, wherever they are, and said, we're just going to, you know, this area here is the area, and this is where the tailings dam is. This is a sensitive area. This has to be protected. And, it's culturally sensitive, and therefore, you know, we got to do it. And, you know, it's just made a mockery of the whole system. It's made a mockery of the process. It's set a dangerous precedent. What level of confidence now? This could happen anywhere in Australia, what this minister's done, to any project in Australia. It doesn't have to be necessarily be a mine. It could be any major project, infrastructure project being built anywhere on our country, whether it's WA, Queensland, Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales, wherever, Tassie. And, you know, this decision can come out of left field in the 11th hour, and it would give no confidence to any company or any proponent who's prepared to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to get it to this stage and go through the proper planning processes, only to have it struck down at the, you know, at the final hour. And so what precedent does it set? What confidence does it provide? And is this really how we want decisions made at the executive level of federal government? Is it under this clouded secrecy, without any transparency, without any scrutiny? I don't think so. I don't think this should be happening. So I've been very strong on it locally. I think the minister didn't attend the Bush Summit we had last week. I think she was too scared to turn up, to be honest. And you know, she would have copped a pretty decent reception from the crowd, I rather suspect. There would have been a lot of unhappy people there. And, you know, this is the decisions they make in Sydney. Once again, city-centric decisions. The decisions they make in Sydney without any regard to the people's lives here in the bush that they're having this decision has a huge impact on.
But the thing is, the warning signs have been there for some years now. You've got the case in New South Wales with Mount Warning, where a group, an Indigenous corporation that seems not connected with the area, has sweet-talked the New South Wales government to locking up Mount Warning. Yet the Indigenous people from around that area says, no, this is nuts. You know, we don't have a problem with it. And these outsiders are overriding our wishes. And then we've got the same thing in Queensland. We've had a number of Indigenous corporations that are not connected with a particular area filing claims against this area. We've got 15 townships now that are under direct threat of native title actually getting freehold title. And in a lot of cases, it's just a couple of different incorporation, Indigenous corporations not associated with that area, making claims basically from the Cape to the New South Wales border. So the writing has been on the wall in regards to the problems that are festering in this area, but no government has started to address it properly and sort of get these things under control. And like I say, they've set up the land councils and that, but what they've done is, you know, ruin their authority or sort of weaken their authority to deal with this, and allowed other groups to whisper in the ear to get some of these disastrous outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just giving these authorities, well, they're not authorities, these bodies, these people, these groups, these zealots, you know, some sort of level of, I suppose, or giving them a platform or a level of access to the minister to influence her decisions, which is contrary to the Act. The Act says that the Act says that the Lands Council is the appropriate authority that should be consulted and discussed and engaged with during this process. And that's for good reasons, because they're made up of local people, elders in many cases, who have a distinct insight into that local area or local communities and the history and traditions and the culture of those local areas. No one's saying we shouldn't be protecting those areas where they exist, but to have it in this particular situation where they're just on a map just saying, oh, this is a sensitive area, oh, this happened here, there's some sort of something happened here thousands of years ago, without any proper basis or any evidence to back it up, is really, really, it just to me just completely just goes against what the public interest test should be. And the public interest should always be what is in the best interest of the local community and the people of the communities and the public, and jobs and economic prosperity and growth and training and recruiting and Indigenous jobs, all those things that would really benefit from a project like this. But that's just been completely shut out by this minister's decision to invoke the declaration under Section 10. And she goes, oh, well, it's only, the minister said, Plibersek said, oh, well, they can move the tailings dam, it's only 16% of the site that it's not that simple. And that just goes to show how naive she is to these issues. I mean, they've done thorough research. That is really the only position for that tailings dam to go. There is nowhere else on the site where it can be placed.
Unless you make water flow uphill.
So, this is just the ridiculous argument you get from people who have lived in the city all their lives, who've got no idea about the bush, no idea about the country. They just go off on whatever people tell them, advisors or, zealots that get in their ear and put propaganda in their ear or bullshit, whatever other bullshit they tell them. And, this is the result.
But their care factor is zero as well, because what they're doing is allow activists and clever activists with people, quite attuned to giving them assistance in lawfare, if it's a good term for some of these actions, it's lawfare, rallying together and just outsmarting the locals type things, because these people do it all in big offices in Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane, and have a plan and undermine everything to the detriment of the regions. But if we could just move on, maybe absolutely. You could give us a bit of an insight of the Bush Summit there that was there last. I think yours was last Thursday. I went to the Townsville one on the Friday before that. Albanese was the keynote speaker.
Oh, yeah.
Along with Dutton, Crisafaldi, and Miles were there as well. But to the credit of the I think Chris Jones, I think it is, the editor for the Courier Mail. He put the question to Albanese about this action to veto the dam and put him on the spot, sort of thing. But good old Lobo, he was prepared for it, obviously, because he says, well, the project isn't completely cancelled or anything. They got an opportunity to address the tailing dam and sort of glossed over it that way. And so obviously that messaging had been thought out some time before. Well, yes, we've vetoed it, but it's not a fait accompli, because if they want to, they can recite the trailing dam. So that allowed the conversation moved on. But I mean, like I say, to Chris Jones' credit, and to, I think the other interviewer was Laura Jays. She was from Sky News. Actually, they put some reasonable questions to Albanese as well through the process, to sort of highlight, well, are the regions really getting a fair go? But I found it, from my point of view, it was too much of an opportunity for politicians to gloss over things and present, well, how well are we doing for the region? Yes, how great the regions are, what they contribute, but then don't sort of back it up. Well, no, we're going to make sure you develop because you going ahead with developing and progress and wealth creation is good for the nation. We didn't see much of that. So can you give us a bit of what the tenor was there? Because you were second last in line. So you were the fifth. You were the first day before they went to. Huh?
I think we were the day before they went to WA. I think on their Bush Summit tour, I believe.
Yeah, I went to Port Hedland for the last one on the Friday.
Yeah. So look, it was Orange was chosen as the New South Wales destination for the Bush Summit, the Daily Telegraph Bush Summit. It was televised on Sky News as well. Great for Orange to be able to host it. It was showcased the region. Great opportunity and platform for local people to get up and attend and speak and listen to the Premier Chris Minns, who came along and spoke, and he reaffirmed his support for the Regis project and his government support for this project, which is admirable from Chris, from the Premier, because obviously it's going at loggerheads with his federal colleagues as well. And I think to his credit, to the Premier and his team, his government's credit, they've shown they're not prepared to have a fight against their federal colleagues for the betterment of New South Wales, which is admirable. Not only was it over the mine, but over GST distribution, for example. That was another thing, over education funding, Gornsky stuff. But yeah, look, obviously the Premier's been very supportive of mining in New South Wales, especially critical minerals mining, gold, copper, which we need for, they want to build all these renewable energy projects all around the place. We need the raw materials to be able to build those things that we need. But, importantly, the Premier knows how much revenue the state derives from mining as well. So that is certainly not lost on them from a government fiscal responsibility point. But I was on a panel discussing rural crime. So we discussed a few regional issues. So rural crime, which is a big one, probably in regional Queensland as well. If I read the reports that I see, Northern Territory.
Well, we're seeing what happened in Northern Territory 2 weeks ago. And it's probably got a big part here, and probably by the time it gets to your 27 election, will also be a big part there.
Yeah. So, look, obviously rural crime's been a problem. I spoke on the panel for that, and we spoke about domestic violence, which is obviously also a problem across all of Australia, but Orange, especially regional New South Wales, I think it's twice the state average of domestic violence events or incidents reported than what there are in other parts of the state, and it's a scourge in our community. So we discussed domestic violence and discussed about some of the programs that are working in terms of youth programs to try and keep some of those disengaged kids at school. There was then the debate on renewable energy versus nuclear. So Barnaby Joyce and Matt Keane went head to head there. I didn't see that because I was at the back by that stage.
You can watch it any time. You can see all the episodes live streamed.
Yeah. I was told it was entertaining. And then that was followed up by there was a couple of panels. One of them was discussing some of the local businesses. So Peter Mortimer, who has a vineyard winery business here in Orange and exports wines to around the world as well as into other parts of Australia. He spoke. Fiona Hall, who Bite Right, that she's one of the largest cherry growers in New South Wales, runs a fairly large operation exporting cherries internationally as well as local markets. So they spoke. There was then also discussions about some of the other local relevant issues affecting our communities. Health's obviously a big one. Phoebe Litchfield, who's a young women's cricketer, represented Australia, who grew up in Orange, raised in Orange, schooled in Orange. She spoke at the Bush Summit as well, and it was well attended. There was no, I think it was fully booked out. There was several hundred people sitting in the auditorium where it was held. It got some great coverage and publicity on its various media platforms. and great for Orange, like I said. And you know, we had the Premier there, we had several ministers there, we had members of Parliament there, we had leaders in business there as well. Regis, obviously, the Regis issue was debated and discussed. The CEO from Regis was in attendance speaking about it. They had a cardboard cutout of Tanya Pliberstik, apparently.
It did have a lot of dart holes in it.
That was it. That was yeah. So because she, I think, had denied or declined, I should say, the invitation to attend, or had other arrangements, prior arrangements. So that was obviously the main focus, because it was only occurred, that decision came out the week or so before the Bush Summit. So that was a red hot topic during the course of the Bush Summit for that week. But look, it went really well, and like I said, it was you know, wonderful to be able to host it in our community, and it drew a lot of attention and focus to Orange and the local issues as well.
I think they're a good thing, but my personal critique is that they're far too fast on top of each other.
Yeah.
I think Townsville had an advantage in regards to, it was on a Friday, the weekend followed after, so they didn't have to get down to I think they were going down to Bendigo till the Monday. They could come in Friday. They had a big function for most of the people, the politicians like Albanese on the night before, and a lot of people came along. And I think that's what they need each time. It needs 2 days, so they can have their dinner at night or function, whatever, and then do the presentation during the day. But my beef with it is it's too much of a opportunity for, you know, the politicians and some businesses to spruik their message rather than actually listen to the region. And the other thing is, with the Townsville one, they had that on the night before, you know, with all those dignitaries attending, and of course it was attended by, you know, all the who's who of Townsville. I would have much rather see all those dignitaries and people, business leaders, up on a stage and facing the ordinary people from regional Queensland to question them on what, you know, what we're saying. Well, you know, you're blocking mines, you're locking up land. You know, why are you doing this to us? You're putting in place legislation and regulations to shut down our commercial fishing industry. And if you're in Western Australia, you're putting up barriers to stop our live sheep trade. You're closing down logging. That's what I'd love to see, and I'd pay to watch that, right? All those, you know, Dutton, Albanese, Miles, Crisafaldi, Robbie Catter, and then there was all the business, the chief CEO of Ampol, the guy from Copper String, and a lot of other projects and renewable projects up there facing a regional audience and listening to us and answering our questions, rather than just come along to the presentation and we'll just pacify you with patting you on the back because you're doing great regions. You are producing 80 to 85% of our export wealth. Basically, if it wasn't for the regions, you know, the Australian dollar would be 30 cents to the American dollar. So yeah, you're doing a great job, but we're not going to help you develop. We're not going to build your roads. We're not going to build your dams. So, but keep up the good work.
Well, they did have the function. I wasn't able to make it because I was at another function actually the night before. They did have a function the night before where they had a bit of a get together. Like I said, I wasn't able to make that because I had another engagement at another function which I earlier committed to. But and then look, it was fairly rushed. They did have a lot jammed in the 4 or 5 hours they had the panel going for, or the panels going for. I know the segment that I was on, I think we had 20 minutes. There was 3 of us. You know, you obviously try and share it around between the 3 speakers. And we could have spoken for a lot longer. We didn't take any questions from the floor. There was an opportunity for people to be able to QR code a question in or message a question through. but certainly we just
That
didn't
was
have,
very selective. It was only one per session, I think.
yeah, right. We didn't, yeah, well, certainly we didn't get any questions during the time that I was on stage with that rural crime segment. We just didn't have time. We, 20 minutes when you got three people talking, asking, being asked questions by a journo, it goes pretty quick. And we
Yeah.
had a countdown, a clock that was facing us that the public couldn't see, or the audience couldn't see, but we had a clock facing us that had 20 minutes that was counting down. And I remember looking at it, and it was like there was something like 5 minutes to go, and I felt,
Haven't
we
even
could be,
touched the
we've
sides
hardly
yet.
touched, yeah, we've hardly touched the sides.
Well,
That's right.
that's probably the problem with that. It's being live streamed to a TV audience, and they're sort of
Yeah,
doing it for the time sale. But I thought it could have been like, I can only talk for Townsville, but
yeah,
it could have started a bit earlier, had
yeah,
a longer lunch break rather than trying to fit this sort of coffee and scones inside.
yeah,
Just had a bigger break at lunchtime,
mm,
and then they had food at 3 o'clock when we finished. Like steak and
uh,
stuff like that.
yeah,
Well, it would have been better, like, right, the 3 hours before, a reasonable lunch break, and then go for another free. So, and then when you finish, you just get, you can just,
yeah,
mingle and stuff with coffee or a few beers or whatever, but you don't need the
yeah,
meal.
yeah,
It could have been done better, I think, in regards to get more in. But it was, I think, one of the most valuable parts of the thing was give opportunity to some people to go and have a talk to, people you probably would never get an opportunity to talk to,
yeah,
like Chris Jones, editor of the Courier Mail, the people from Sky News, speak to them, Wagstaff from the Weekly Times, and things like that. And I spoke to Adam Giles for a fair time,
yeah,
so that was a good opportunity.
yeah,
So and I think those mingling situations
yeah,
for ordinary folk, and
yeah,
even people like yourself, to have your 5 or 10 minutes with them, and maybe
yeah,
even exchange business cards or something like that. So you got
yeah.
a contact. So it's all networking, isn't it?
Yeah, there's. I know. At the yeah, and there was a bit of that happening afterwards. After, like, they had a bit of a area at the back of the stage or behind the stage in one of the other rooms where they had a bit of a post interview networking area where people who were coming off the panel, and then people from the members of the public were able to come in as well, and talk to some of the politicians. And yeah, because I spoke to quite a few people there, as did a number of other politicians that were there as well, members of the public who had an opportunity to be able to engage with various people. So look, I think it's sure, it could be done better, but it's a good way, I suppose. A large platform, both the local, the Telegraph or the Courier Mail, whatever it is in Queensland, and Sky News, to really be able to ventilate and shine a spotlight on a lot of local regional issues. It's hard to get across everything and devote the time to it. I understand that, but I think it's yeah, look, it's a good opportunity to be able to flesh out a lot of the issues. And there were some good journalists. We had Ben English from the Daily Telegraph. He's the editor for the Daily Telegraph. He and I had a Josh Hanrahan, who's a journo from the Telegraph as well, who was moderating or asking the questions on the particular panel that I was on. And they were good. They ran it quite well. Asked some difficult questions, as you would expect. The public has a right to hear and want to hear what you, as a member of parliament or policymaker, or what your views and stances are. And I know one of the questions I got asked about was about increasing the age of criminal responsibility, as has happened, I think, maybe in Queensland. Where at New South Wales it's 10 to, from 10, I think has it been raised to 12 in Queensland?
I think it is 12, but we're talking about 14 and things like that. But I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. So I was asked about that, and I don't support raising it. I think 10 is appropriate age. Kids that are 10 these days are pretty street smart. A lot of them, with all the social media and digital media they've been exposed to. And it's a sliding scale, without going into it too much legalistically. you know, dolly income packs, common law. You know, it's got to, the child's got to know it's, you know, the child might get charged at 10, but you know, between 10 and 14, there's a sliding scale for dolly income packs, and you know, the older they get, the more they're likely to know that what they're doing is more than just being naughty, but you know, it has a criminal intent. But anyway, that was something that I was asked about by one of the journos. Would I support raising? Because there's been a lot of discussion, and some other states have done it, and certainly I don't. I think we just leave it as it is. 10 being, I think, the appropriate age, minimum age.
Well, here's the biggest problem with Canberra, you know, the cocaine capital of Australia, intake. The people there running the place, they want to raise the age of criminal intent to 14, and I think they've actually passed that. But then the same people want to lower the voting age to 16. So what they're saying, a kid doesn't know right from wrong until they're 14, but in that 2 years from 14 to 16, they go from not knowing what's right or wrong to being able to vote, decide who to vote for, and policy in that. Like, give us a break, you know. Just finishing up on the summit, it did give, from my perspective in Cairns, and I subscribe to the News Limited papers, but we had the Courier Mail, Townsville Bulletin, and the Cairns Post. They're probably the main, but then you've got Sunshine and Gold Coast papers as well. That basically gave the regions about at least 2 weeks from before it started to after it finished, of get exposure, getting stories out there that probably would have never got the space, because basically they're devoting about 4 to 8 pages every day to the Bush Summit, no matter where it was held. So you had the normal paper, but you had an insert basically of 8 pages for 2 weeks about the regions. And it gave a lot of people opportunity. So it is a good thing. And the kudos must go to Gina Reinhardt, really, for you know, stumping up the money for really behind it, and also putting her you know, her personal thumbprint on it as well.
You're right. She did, and I should have mentioned that earlier. She did give an address that was played through the online on the screen for us all to listen to, and it went for about 20 minutes, and she raised some good points. And Barnaby Joyce introduced her as well. And you know, I think it's good on her for you know, supporting it. And
I recommend that you and others have a look at the live stream from the Port Hedland one, because she was actually there and she spoke personally, but she was in the audience, and the camera went to her on a number of occasions, and there was someone from the federal government, I think he's the Minister for Public Servants or some garbage, whatever, Patrick Gorman or whatever, speaking on behalf of the government. And I'll tell you what, when he was speaking, if looks could kill, old Gina certainly, you know, drove daggers through his heart, sort of thing, when he was just waffling on about what a great job they do, sort of thing. So that part of it is worthwhile, just watching her in the audience as well as the speech. So I completely recommend that you have a look at it. Anyone just listening to this, go and look at the Bush Summit Port Hedland episode. So
I will have to check it.
So we've got over there, but before we go, can you give us a bit of an insight on what's going on with Phil for the next 3 years and 2027?
Yeah, look, pretty busy. Oh, that was my watch. I don't know what happened there. Maybe it's
time's up.
Sorry, it's time's up. Yeah, look, busy across the Orange electorate. Obviously, we had the big floods over here. I know probably may not have got any airtime in Queensland, but we had some fairly big floods in central west New South Wales across my electorate back in November of 2022. So we're going through.
Well, it makes a change from this more.
Yeah. So we're going through that at the moment. I chair community leaders forum. So the federal and state government have put up $100 million to look at. Part of it's a housing package for those impacted residents, to future-proof or mitigate and make their homes more flood resilient. There's potentially buybacks, whole range of things happening in relation to that space. So that's keeping us fairly busy. So myself, two of the federal MPs whose area overlaps this area, Michael McCormack and Andrew G, we're also on the particular leaders forum, as well as the 4 mayors of the 4 local government areas. So we're in the process of working through that. So that's keeping us busy. But look, across the electorate, there's lots going on. Only today I was out of Forbes announcing grants. I'm going to be in Parks on Friday. There's cost of living pressures. There's a lot I'm hearing about, the impact it's having on people, families, businesses, electricity, utility prices. Another one that's hurting a lot of families. This renewable stuff is causing a lot of angst in the community as well. There's proposed wind farms popping up all over the place now. A lot of these are being built by international companies or foreign nationals, and as I said earlier, very divisive in communities, turning neighbours against neighbours, families against families. It's been very divisive, that particular issue, and working through that. It's a difficult one. We're trying to engage and ensure there's proper consultation and engagement, proper engagement, not just tokenistic engagement by these proponents. And obviously there's a federal election coming up, not too far away, so things are heating up here locally for that. Council elections, we've got our local government elections next weekend, so the local councils are all jockeying for positions, and you can't find a corner around Orange that hasn't got core foods plastered over it at the moment. So but look, there's lots going on. We've got the special activation precinct in Parks that was the previous coalition government set up. That's looking at getting some investment, some major investment businesses, ag technology, to be a real inland hub that has the inland rail going through it. It's basically halfway point between the ports of Brisbane and Melbourne, and it has the east-west railway as well going through Parks. So Parks is logistically, I suppose, well positioned to capture on that, and it's becoming a real logistics hub. Getting produce to the port within 12 hours is what the objective is. So whether that be grain or other produce that's grown in and around Parks or the Parks Central West District, potentially getting on those trains, getting them to Brisbane or Melbourne, and off to foreign markets within a fairly short period of time. So that's happening out there. But look, there's always plenty happening. There's always plenty happening right across the electorate. And if I had a crystal ball, and who could foreshadow what's going to happen in the future, but in the next year or 2 years before the next state election. But it will be here soon enough. Like you said, March 2027 will blink and it will be here. And obviously we've got a Labor government here in New South Wales, Chris Minns. It's a minority government, so the crossbench wields a fair level of influence in the Legislative Assembly. There is 93 members in the Legislative Assembly. I think there's 12 crossbench members. So there's 3 Greens, and then there's 9 independents. So, it's a minority government. The government needs to work with the crossbench. Myself, Roy Butler, work quite closely, and Helen Dalton. We're obviously conservative independents, if I could, describe us that way, which really is, sort of offsets the 3 Greens that are in on the crossbench as well, but there's a few other left-leaning Green crossbenchers, a couple of Teal crossbenchers as well. So, yeah, look, it's an interesting dynamic. But, Chris, the Premier, I think, he's been out to Orange since he's been the Premier at least 3 times, more times than any other Premier he has in recent history. And I believe he's doing a good job. They've been doing a lot of work trying to get the budget back in the balance. So, you know, it's always difficult when you're in government. They did inherit a huge debt. So they're trying to rein that in, which has meant they had to cut back on some of their capital expenditure. But I think things may loosen up. The budget reins that the Treasurer has sort of been holding them by may loosen up in the last 2 years of this term. But I think they've used the first 2 years to try and really clamp down on that debt that they inherited. But yeah, look, I only heard today the Premier make an announcement about procurement, local procurement for government contracts. So it's over $40 billion that gets in across government agencies in New South Wales in the procurement process. A lot of that goes offshore internationally. So it's all to be done locally unless there's good reasons why it hasn't been, and they're going to be held to account, these government agencies, as to why they're not procuring locally, which is good. I've always been a big advocate for, you know, using local businesses and local companies for local projects, state-based projects. I know I was quite critical of the previous coalition government when we had the new highway overtaking lanes, $400 million of government money that was put to increase the number of overtaking lanes on the new highway, which is basically the inland spine of New South Wales.
A number of times.
yeah, you would have. And I think there was a Queensland-based company that had the contract for it. Yeah. And the local council, Forbes Council especially, wasn't very happy because they could have done a lot of the work and they missed out on the opportunity. And it was like, the contract was given to a Queensland-based company, and it's like, you know, like sometimes I think local companies and local businesses, local councils, you know, there's got to be some incentive, I think, to give those contracts to the locals where they possibly can. I mean, obviously, keeps some money locally, supports jobs locally. You know, we shouldn't be procuring stuff from overseas when there's options available for it to be purchased in New South Wales or indeed Australia. So, yeah, look, there's plenty happening. Plenty will happen over the next few years. You know, like I said, we're 2.5 years out, I think, from the next election. But you know, you'll blink and it will be here before you know it. So yeah, we'll see how we go.
I'm sure you'll be well and truly in the running unless there's some misfortune comes to you. But I think with the situation you're already in a minority government, and neither party, you know, in general, is polling well in first preferences. You know, they're down. You know, they're down in the 30% sort of thing. You know, that's giving a lot of leeway to minors and independents and that. So, a major party has to do an absolutely magnificent job to sort of in government to enhance its vote. I mean, because let's face it, public's not very forgiving these days.
No, and they're well informed these days. You know, social media, online media. You know, they're a lot more in tune with what's happening. Absolutely.
And they can keep in contact with each other as well, much better than they could before. Yeah,
that's it. Exactly.
Okay, look, we've gone over the time. I really thank you very much, but just let you have the final say before we wrap up, and I'll introduce next week's guest.
No worries. Well, thanks very much for having me, Bill. I really appreciate you taking the time to give me an opportunity to talk to you again. It's great catching up again. I know we've spoken a while back, and it's great that you're doing these regional wraps because it really gives the voice to regional people a platform to be able to raise issues and people to be able to, like-minded people who are the silent majority in regional New South Wales. That's the reality, but often overlooked. You know, who really are looking for someone to stand up and voice their beliefs and their views and their opinions. That's really important. And you know, I know here in Orange and in the electorate that I represent, I'm very fortunate enough. I certainly do not take it for granted. Very privileged to be in the position I'm in, to be a voice for a beautiful part of New South Wales, one of the best parts of the state, in my opinion, here in Orange in the Central West. And we are a real powerhouse for New South Wales as well. When you look at what we're producing, economically, socially, across our communities, we punch well above our rate, as does many regional communities. But there's something very special about this part of the world in terms of what we grow, what we produce, and what the capability of the communities and the intellect of so many people that are doing such amazing things.
And the character.
And the character and the strong, resilient, tough character of many people across the regions, for that sake. So look, thanks for having me. It's always a privilege to be able to get on and join and chat with you, Bill. I always enjoy it. And let's chat again shortly.
Okay, thanks very much. I really appreciate the time you've given us tonight.
No worries, Bill. Anytime, mate.
Thank you. If you enjoyed today's night show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next week, I'll be talking with Dr. Jacob Deans. Now, Jacob had an article, a full half-page article in the Townsville Bulletin a week or so ago, poo-pooing new states and North Queensland, that it can't be, invited him on to give him the opportunity to put his case in regards to why regional Australia can't be new states. So join us again next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thanks very much.